I found this very interesting. In this book here, I have a wonderful article written by Stephen Neff. And Stephen Neff, it's Permanent Neutrality, a model for peace, security, and justice. But Stephen Neff, he's the greatest expert on neutrality alive. He's in Scotland, and he made this very, very witty observation that neutrality is actually a counter proposal to collective security. It's like this collective security, because instead of making a top-down system where you have a League of Nations or a United Nations that mandates peace for everybody, you create a lot of neutral buffer states in between the zones that could be dangerous to each other, and you kind of you collectivize, not collectivize, but you distribute and make war or conflict as small as possible. It's a different approach, and it's not a centralized approach. And in this sense, it's a different paradigm. That's why the whole Hague Conventions, 1907, and so on, the whole neutrality law dates back to the time before collective security and the world government through the League of Nations. It's a different paradigm, but it's also a paradigm aimed at making us fight as little as possible, toning it down. And the interesting thing is that 100 years later, we have seen the new paradigm, the outlawing of war. We have outlawed war for 100 years now. Has never worked. We always had war. And at the same time, neutrality never went away. And the old paradigm and the new paradigm, they're intermingled. And we need to understand these paradigms.
I think there's lots of space for intellectual exercise. So, these are wonderful ideas. We need to think beyond the conventional paradigms and the conventional times of our international relations in the West is either realism, which is like to fight for everybody, particularly Mearsheimer's offensive realism. There's no way major powers can make a peace, everybody on each other's throat, or alternatively, liberal interventionists try to change everybody to something like a Western style democracy. I don't think these conventional paradigms worked. And the old foreign policy tricks, I would say, like a conventional divide and rule. And interesting enough, I'm reading a very old book published in 1960. Instead of dividing and rule, it's dividing and quit. This is by a former British civilian official in India. How the British colonialists, before they finally quit colonialism, they artificially divided these into Hindus and Pakistanis. So the day of Indian independence was the day of the first war between Pakistan and India. And they fought several after. It's still the most heavily fortified and with the nuclear weapons. So I think at a certain point, probably we need to give some thought to the issue of how to make not only conflict resolution, but what kind of peace we want. The peace of, go back to the Napoleon Wars, the peace of Vienna, Congress of Vienna, or the Versailles. None of them actually, maybe the Congress of Vienna was more successful, last for almost 100 years. But the 20th century was miserable. All the peace settlement made was the beginning of another war.
Yes.
With some exceptions. So the end of the Cold War, looking back, is the beginning of this reluctant expansionist of unilateralism or unipolarity. And that's something that, and also artificially divided the world into us and the Washington Consensus, which is a brilliant idea based on liberal interventionism. And then this is like a Machiavellian divide and quit. Look at the Middle East today.
Is he proud of it?
It's the same.
Is he proud of it, the author?
Yes, the author celebrates this. But of course, he never imagined within his lifetime that the Pakistan-Indian conflict never stopped. But this has been the cases of the Middle East. The Sunnis, the Shiites is artificially divided. The West aligned with certain against others. You know, come on.
Yeah.
These are the standardized approach of international relations or foreign policy practice of the Anglo-Saxon or the Anglo space. This is
that's why, you know, one of the ways to fight this, people who want peace are those who try to bring people together, not the ones who try to divide them. So we have to work on that. And we can do that, luckily, in little pockets, little spaces, the academic space, the scientific space, the cultural space, sports. And you can see how the forces of war always try to finish that, right? Even sports, like the International Olympic Committee, how they're trying to keep the Russians out and everybody divided. It's typical. The forces of war are always those that try to divide people.
Yeah, and the division of the world along ideological line is so much. It's absurd. Even like a Pushkin, his writings are banned in libraries in the West. But come on, Pushkin's grandfather was African American. He's black. The Russians were politically more correct during Tsar's time. Can you believe it? His father was brought, the grandfather brought from Africa and served in the Russian royal court. The Russians are less discriminative against them. So I'm sorry, there are so many funny and absurd things in the world these days.
Are.
And I don't know what to say, but I hope the most immediate thing is to have some breaks of this senseless war. That Ukraine's east part was forever destroyed. You look at those graveyards like the end of World War II, even worse, by the way, because the back and forth, the heavily fortified. And I think Western special forces already operated inside Ukraine, according to the leaked documents. And escalation is just a few steps away. And I'm truly worried that if we don't do something, we'll reach a point of no return.
You know, I have one very pessimistic, cynically optimistic conclusion to make. We will be united, either in peace or in death. It's going to be one of the two, but we will be the same at the end of the process. I just hope we will choose the peaceful one, because like having having wine together is so much more pleasant than being dead together.
I hope so. I hope my own pessimism would be wrong, but I'm not sure. With all the sincerity of the Chinese now, maybe the French or other peoples. I think as long as the Ukrainians and the Russians still fighting, there's a little chance. But it looks like the Russians this time accept the Chinese 12 points in Moscow. But I believe the Chinese still try to work with the Ukraine side, still maybe to a certain degree. It's not publicized yet. But the real issue is the conflict actually is between Russia and the United States.
Yes.
So this is So at a certain point, the United States too needs to come around to this. Look at those wars America fought. They all come around. Vietnam, Afghanistan.
Eventually.
Eventually, Korea. They all come around. There are people in the United States have different views, like Rand Paul, this congressman It was an amazing short op-ed piece I'll send to you, essentially talking about how to look at the Middle East changes the Chinese peace effort. Now, Washington is very, very angry because it's different from the United States. But, this may be a conventional conflict between Democrats and Republicans / independent. But there are people thinking, there are hopes. And even the military, like General Milley again, a couple of weeks ago, demanding, it's publicized, to lower the rhetoric, the fever of anti-China fever in the United States. Come on, it's the military now like a peacemaker. The civilians is more hawkish. This is the impression from General Milley's.
The poison of ideology.
The military actually knows war kills. So that's something that I think lots of people that are talking about the conflict and like the beginning of World War I, celebrating, like going to a party, nobody imagined that they were marching to a death trap for 4 years.
Yeah.
And so this is something like, in the 21st century, people still like war is a game, like a video game. People get killed and come around. No, we are in a very difficult and dangerous state, and in really uncharted waters. Henry Kissinger, who will turn 100 years old next month, he's been one of the few dinosaur age statesmen in the West, but nobody listened to him. Nobody. I watched his career path, and he has been advised every president of the United States since Nixon. He even talked to Donald Trump. But so far, Biden has not talked to him yet. Can you believe it? Mm. And maybe those people around President Biden believe they're the best and the brightest, which is the title of a book by, this legendary American writer, Stanford. Yeah, he wrote the last book about the Korean War. He published the first book about Vietnam in 1969. The title is The Best and the Brightest. After serving as a war correspondent in Vietnam for a year for Time magazine, coming back with the title, The Best and the Brightest. I was a language student in Beijing. We were reading his book, The Best and the Brightest, which is an irony. It was the best and brightest, like the wizard, like Secretary of State McNamara, like the National Security Advisor George McBondy. These from Harvard, Princeton, we believe they're the smartest, but they led this nation to the quagmire of Vietnam War. It is ironical, the best and the brightest. It's a title, The Best and the Brightest.
Yeah, now I get it. Now I understand it. The best and the brightest led us into this disaster, into this catastrophe.
Yes, it's a
so-called.
The title is, but the book is a serious book. And later I met him, the author, a couple of times when he was writing his last book, Korean War. I published a lot of things about the Korean War. So we met, we had a good time. And he asked me, if I meet you, what should I give to you, bring to you? I said, well, could you bring me a copy of your first book, Best and Brightest? Because I have a small one I read many times, but it was broken. So in our first meeting, he signed his name, gave it to me. And he's a great historian, scholar. And I think for today's world, I think we need to be wiser, not just be smart. Sometimes smart and stupidity is just the same thing. And people like Henry Kissinger, really talk about, that I quote in my recent piece, right, is end the war of the world, essentially adopt his notion of the 1916 moment, right? I coined the term 1916 moment. 1916 moment was 2 years into World War I, when people, politicians of both sides realized it was pointless to continue the war. But for some reason, they missed the opportunity, continue the war for another 2 years. So this was what Kissinger published at the end of last year. And he was talking about 1916, talk about the current Ukraine war. It's basically a frozen front line, very little progress, just sense of the killing. It's time to stop fighting, look for and grab the opportunity for anything other than fighting. If you miss this opportunity, we're heading to the unknown future. So this is I coined the term, the 1916 moment. So I invented this term,
I hope,
on the basis of Kissinger's, idea. And end the war, or we may end the world. So I think this is a moment of reckoning. But I hope we stretch this process and try to push for some meaningful action on all sides. And that's I think it's important for the world.
You're absolutely right. We've been talking for 2 hours. Thank you very much for taking all the time.
I did apologize. So thank you for having this chance with me, and I apologize for my long comments, and it could be wrong, but I hope we may open up some different venue to approach the issue differently from the conventional wisdom or conventional stupidity.
I hope so too. We have to keep collective thinking. So this is also part of the collective thinking process, right? Because we also share it with anyone who wants to see it, and see reactions, and hopefully, war is a collective exercise.
I know.
Thinking too is a collective exercise. Peace is a collective exercise.
Sure.
Yubin, thank you very much, and we'll talk again.
Thank you very much. A great pleasure.